The F1 Focus Podcast with MV Welman and Hendrik Verwoerd.
Welcome back to the Formula One Focus after our own summer break and South Africa's case winter break. Hendrik, it's nice to be back, man. Welcome.
It is, and what nice, weather we're having at the moment. It's definitely spring in the air, so things are looking up.
Well, where I'm staying, it was winter on Saturday and summer on Sunday. There was no spring at all. You plug the heater out and you plug the fan in. That's how bad, how quickly it went. That's quite interesting. But anyway, I'm so glad to be back. Last weekend at Zandvoort, the Dutch Grand Prix, lots of action, McLaren being their metronomical self. But then, for a change, McLaren failed. Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, and I think, it's worth pointing out that it wasn't an engine failure or a power unit failure as was suspected right from the word go, because there was smoke visible. Suspicion was that the Mercedes, it was a Mercedes engine failure or a power unit failure. Turned out it wasn't. McLaren was very clear afterwards that they're not pointing their finger at Mercedes. They suspected that it was something to do with their own chassis. And I think it turned out afterwards that it was an oil leak. So, you cannot point a finger to the engine manufacturer for an oil leak in any engine, whether it's a Formula One power unit or your own car engine. That is not something to do with reliability. So, let's bury that. Unfortunately, of course, for poor old Lando Norris. Because what would have been a deficit of 16 points by finishing second to Piastri, now all of a sudden he's faced with a deficit of 34 points with only 9 races to go. So it looks like a bit of a mountain to climb for him. He did say afterwards, I think after the whole thing sort of settled down in his mind, he did say afterwards, well, this now frees him up so that he can now go for it. He's got nothing that can keep him back now because, the gap is so large. He has to try and win every race from here on in. Saying that, it's not, of course, an impossibility. One would expect that the pendulum has sort of swung in the direction of Piastri at the moment, because he can afford not to take any risks. He can afford to finish second to his teammate for quite a few races coming up. But let's not forget, of course, that in previous seasons, the same sort of situation was faced by the likes of Kimi Räikkönen in 2007, the likes of Sebastian Vettel in 2010. Not quite the same sort of margin, but, Sebastian in 2010 was third in the championship standings by the final race, and he won the title. Even the likes of Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes on I think 1 or 2 occasions, he had to, after the sort of summer or the summer break, he was so far behind teammate Nico Rosberg that he had to basically finish first or second, if not win the last 9 races or so. It has happened in the past. But there's another factor that we should also not forget, and that is that we still have 3 sprint weekends ahead. And the total points available on a sprint weekend for both a victory in the Grand Prix and a victory in the sprint race, 33 points available. So all you need really is a failure from Piastri in any of the next 9 races for the situation to turn itself completely on its head. It's not a foregone conclusion at all in any way that Piastri is now on a canter to take the title. Yes, it may be his to lose, but it doesn't mean that he is going to win it. Certainly not. And I don't think one should now think, well, 34 points, there's 9 races to go. That basically means that he's got to score 4 points more than his teammate, that's Lando's, 4 points per race for the next 9 races to be able to win the title. Motor racing and Formula One doesn't work that way. Things come from out of the blue. All of a sudden, things can change. They've often changed like that, and I will be surprised, very, very surprised, if there isn't, some kind of a readjustment of the point situation between the two of them in the next 9 races.
Interesting thing for me, if you look at Oscar Piastri from last year and Oscar Piastri of this year, and we saw it again this weekend. For the entire weekend, all practice rounds and everything, he was second to Lando, but he kept improving and kept improving. Yeah. And right when it counted, lo and behold, he's on pole. And I think not just the fact that he's so good mentally now, I think as good as mentally as he is, Lando is maybe the opposite.
Well, I think, and we've said this on a number of occasions. Certainly mentally, Piastri seems to be the stronger of the two, despite the fact that he's only, what is it, in his third season in Formula One, with Lando since 2019, is it?
Yes.
That he's been with McLaren. So it's his seventh season, sixth season. So yes, certainly Piastri, we've often said this, he seems to be the one that's level-headed, that doesn't make the mistakes, that doesn't get affected by the situation that he faces by pressure or anything like that. So he is certainly the man, and again, this is something we've said in the past on more than one occasion. He is the one that seems to be the more deserving of the two, of the title. Just looking at the way that he approaches his racing, the way that he races, and the way that he deals with situations, he is the better of the two. But that doesn't mean anything. That certainly doesn't mean anything. Not in motorsport, at least. He can be the deserving in quotes, the deserving champion this year. But the guy who scores the most points at the end of the season is the champion. There's no question about that, and you cannot get around that. And we still have 9 races to go, so there's nothing that is set in stone at all.
Well, again, McLaren was metronomic, and as expected, they ran away with it and would have been a first and a second. But because Lando's engine failed, Isack Hadjar on the podium. I mean, we've earmarked both him and Bortoleto sort of the rookies of the year, I would think. But Hadjar has got something special as well.
I think he's laid down a marker for the second seat at Red Bull next year. So Red Bull is in a bit of a quandary because Yuki is certainly not working. And he's not improving, despite the fact that now he has the same specification car than Max. He hasn't had it for a few races now because of I think, still his accident at Imola. Yuki has not improved to the degree that I would have. I think that Red Bull would have, and especially Helmut Marko would have expected him to improve in order to ensure that he has the second seat next year. And the key is really, the lap time difference between him and Max. Yes, he has improved, but he has not improved sufficiently. And I think, especially after the Zandvoort race, Hadjar's very welcome podium. I mean, what a fantastic story! What a great scene, wasn't it? To see the youngster, the one whose season started off in such a disastrous way in Australia when he went off on the parade lap, and he had to be, he had to have basically the arm of Lewis Hamilton's father put around him to console him, basically. And who would have expected just a few races, 14 races later, that he would be on the podium in his rookie year. So great for him. And if he keeps on improving like this, he is certainly setting down a marker. And I think the question would then be, should Red Bull sign him up? I think it's a little bit early now to say that. It's far too early. But if he does continue on this continuum, can you say that? If he follows this graph, then he can certainly, I think, make a very strong case for the second seat next year, as opposed to Yuki Tsunoda. If he continues, on the path that he is at the moment, because Red Bull doesn't really have anybody else. Are they going to get the youngster back from Racing Bulls, Lawson? Are they going to ask him back after dropping him after just 2 races? No, they're not going to do that. So that they can't keep Yuki at this point. I don't think they will keep him. So Hadjar is the only other possibility, it seems, at this point, that they could sign him. They don't have anybody really ready in the path or the Red Bull development program, and of course somebody there should first go to Racing Bulls. So I suspect that is probably what they're going to do. But then, being thrown into this situation at Red Bull as a teammate to Max Verstappen, is he going to be mentally strong enough? He does seem to be mentally pretty strong. He doesn't seem to be thrown easily because he was under serious pressure from the likes of Leclerc and George Russell at Zandvoort. And he kept his head, he kept cool. He had the car, clearly he had the car to do that. And it's not easy to pass on that circuit. But we did see a number of overtaking maneuvers during the course of the race. So it was possible. But he kept his cool and he was there to finish on the podium when the disaster struck the McLaren car. So I was very glad to see that. It's always great to see something
You were
like
glad
that.
to see him on the podium. You're not glad to see McLaren fail.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Glad to see, another new face and to see, the progression, especially, the progression that he's made from the beginning of the year.
I heard a bit of a rumor that Yuki's got another 5 races to prove himself, and then if it doesn't work, he's gonna. I think they're going to swap him and Hadjar, but also now Hadjar said he doesn't want to go to Red Bull yet. He thinks it's too soon.
Yeah, it's Helmut Marko again. I think he plays the media a little bit, and I think he hinted when he said in some interview somewhere that they've got until October to make the decision for next year. Okay, so October, if I can just have a look at the calendar, that means where are we? 26th of October is Mexico City. So that I think is probably what is going to be the situation. They're going to give him until the Mexican Grand Prix. But who knows? I mean, there were other situations where people gave a deadline and they never met that deadline. This cannot be cast in stone. It depends on how things develop.
I'm just thinking it might make sense in the sense that, okay, Yuki, you haven't made it. Let's swap you two before the end of the season and give Isack a bit of a chance to get used to this car. So when we get to the next season, he's already acclimatized to the team. He's
but next year's car is going to be completely different. So
of course, true.
So he won't, I think, benefit at all to be thrown into the deep end at Red Bull in a car that is clearly almost impossible to drive by, for anybody than Max. Other than Max. So, I don't think that would make any sense at all. So I think it's a bit of a false deadline. Probably, as I said, Marko using the media to put some pressure on him, on Yuki, to try and entice him to improve his performance. How he can do that if he's not able. Well, look, he has improved a little bit on various occasions. He has been closer to Max as far as lap times are concerned. But it's not.
Yeah. The difference being better and being good enough, I think, for me, Yuki is simply not good enough. Let's talk about Ferrari a little bit. Talk about that big turnaround from Friday's disaster, when on Saturday they suddenly turned things around a little bit. The race was a bit of a disaster as well. Lewis, I don't know what went wrong with Lewis. 5 plus grid penalty, 2 penalty points for not having seen a yellow flag from a 7 times world champion. That's a bit funny. And then, of course, Leclerc been taken out by the young Kimi Antonelli, but I mean, things look promising on Saturday after a very, very poor start on Friday.
So I think that's the positive, that Ferrari is spinning out of what has clearly been, a disaster of a weekend for them as far as results are concerned. They did improve quite substantially in terms of the performance of the car, both cars, from Friday to Saturday. And on Sunday also in race conditions, they seem to be right there competitively. Lewis just made a mistake. It was one of those things that happens. People make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. He put his wheel on a slippery piece of painted curb and lost the car. That happens. One shouldn't, I think, read too much into that. It is strange for him to make this sort of mistake. It doesn't happen often. That's why, it is remarkable that he makes these sort of mistakes, but he does. Charles, I think, was just a little bit unlucky. If I remember correctly, just before he was called into the pits by his team, he said his tires are fine. He doesn't need to pit. But they called him in. He came into the pits. He came out, and then it was him and Kimi, and that was it. They both, because I think they wanted to undercut him, or he was trying to undercut them, or whatever. There was an undercut situation, and that was the result in the end. Poor old little Kimi, taking out an Italian driver, taking out Ferrari the week before Monza. I wonder what kind of reception he's going to get at Monza this weekend from the Tifosi. So that's going to be interesting to see. But again, Kimi, I don't know. He seems to be much more unstable in sort of the latter half of the first half of the season than the first 4, 5, 6 races, when he was very, very competitive, consistent anyway. And things started to go wrong. I think when they started to change the car, the Mercedes, they changed the suspension and it didn't work for him. And then now they've changed it back and he's trying to find his feet. And Toto Wolff is saying, look, we did expect this. We did expect that he would that we would pull out our hair on some occasions this season. It's his first year in a top team. It's a learning year for him, and this sort of thing is to be expected. I see there's some media starting to say that Mercedes are now protecting protecting Kimi too much. He's making too many mistakes, or he's not performing as expected. And, I think there's a point there. Although I have a lot of sympathy for the point, the viewpoint that he's only 19. He's just turned 19. It is his first season. It is a car that is very difficult to drive, unpredictable. As George Russell has also complained about that throughout the season. So for him to come in and Kimi to come in and to be expected to perform on the same, more or less the same level as George, I think that was a little bit too much. But then again, he was so talked up before the season, especially by Toto. Another Max Verstappen or another, once in a generation talent, and well, at this point it doesn't quite show. But I think we should also be a little bit more lenient in any judgment this season for any driver who's struggling. And for the point that I have made on a number of occasions, these cars are at the very end of the current development cycle. They are so on an edge because they've been developed up to the very edge of the maximum performance that could be gotten out of these cars. So it must be extremely difficult to find, or to be comfortable in a car that is unpredictable at those sort of speeds. Let's not forget that the Formula One car is on the edge all the time. The car is sliding around through every single corner, and the driver has to control that. And when it oversteers, or it understeers, it is sliding, and that's what he needs to become comfortable with. So I think let's just and I think next year we're going to have exactly the same situation, just the opposite. No, that doesn't make sense. But we're going to have the opposite situation, where the cars are at the beginning of the development cycle, and also probably quite unpredictable in terms, because let's not forget that next year the aerodynamics are going to change. The power delivery is going to change. So everything is going to be much different to now. And there's already been a lot of emphasis or speculation. Media are now starting to ask drivers and team principals about next year's car and what they expect and how would it be to drive and how competitive is it going to be. And Toto Wolff saying, yeah, we might even reach 400 k's an hour and down the straight next year. I can't see that happening. But anyway, so it's a little bit of I don't know why I'm saying all these things, because there's no answer to any of your questions, but I think it's the things that we need to take into account.
I want to get back to Ferrari. Coming up, Monza. So Ferrari's launched a special livery.
Yes.
I think it's quite attractive. We're going to put it on the screen here. Tell me about that. What's the thinking behind this? I think.
Well, what they're doing is that they're celebrating Niki Lauda's very first championship, or the race in which he clinched his very first championship. It was at Monza in 1975, exactly 50 years ago. On Sunday will be exactly on the day as well, the 7th of September, 1975. He drove the 312T, I think it was, and the livery is basically what the livery of that car was at that time. So they are they're commemorating that, and I think it's a brilliant idea for them to do that, because it really throws back to a large part of their heritage, of the Ferrari heritage. And a large part, I think, also or at least a significant part of the history of Monza itself. So the cars, I haven't seen any pictures of the drivers' overalls, but they're gonna they're going to reflect Niki Lauda's overalls design also.
Right. So of course, Monza for Ferrari. I mean, that's the ultimate race. Last year, the dreams came true. I think this year we might see a surprise. Like you said, Ferrari is the only top team who hasn't won anything.
Yes. No, last year all four of them won at least once. Now all three of the top four have won at least once, and Ferrari is the only one that's missing out. Who knows what can happen? Monza does strange things for Ferrari. Uh, if one thinks back only last year, Leclerc won the race. He was never given a chance. Ferrari wasn't competitive last year at this point, but coming to Monza, they were competitive. And Charles took a victory. I think he was the only one that did a one stop, and he took advantage of that strategy. McLaren basically, well, not McLaren necessarily, but Lando Norris should have won that race, but he started from pole and then gave way to his teammate at the second chicane, and that cost him not only second place but also dropped him down to third because Leclerc then eventually took advantage of the whole situation. So let's hope that something happens this weekend. I've been to Monza on a number of occasions. It is the race if you want to feel the atmosphere and experience the passion of the Italian tifosi. That is the race to go to. In 1988, I wasn't there, but this is something that I always remember. It was the only race that McLaren did not win that year. And Ferrari did a 1-2 at Monza, and that was a week after Enzo Ferrari's death. So, as I say, things at Monza happen for Ferrari on occasion. And I'm certainly looking forward to a little bit of an upset from the normal pattern that we've had so far, with McLaren dominate. Nothing against McLaren, and they're doing a fantastic job, and they deserve to be Constructors' Championship champions and also to have the Drivers' Champion. But, Monza, as I say, is so special that it would be so great if well, let's say, Lewis Hamilton finds a way of winning the race on Sunday. Like, can you imagine what sort of reaction that will be and how good that would be for Formula One? I don't think the chances are very good, but it could well happen. Charles Leclerc, as I said, won last year as a surprise as well. So there's another thing that people are actually pointing out that could be interesting. The fastest lap, and this is not a racing lap, but a downright lap record in Formula One is at Monza, and that is held, I think, by Lewis Hamilton, 264 kilometers an hour average. Yes. That was a qualifying lap in. I think it was before the dispensation anyway. But the trend has been for either one of the two McLarens this year to be very close, if not better than current lap qualifying lap records on a number of occasions. So are we going to see a Lando Norris pole position faster than an average of 264 k's an hour? That would be something. That does in fact approach the 400 k's an hour top speed down the main straight. They do 360, 370 sometimes, depending on downforce levels or whatever. But anyway, so that's just a little point of interest that I will be looking out for.
Other news that broke over the summer holiday is the worst kept secret in Formula One, like you and I referred to, Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas signing for Cadillac. We were sort of sure about Sergio. We were not that sure about Valtteri Bottas, but I mean, he made those little videos. We was looking at Cadillac's driving seat. Remember, they actually escalated. Yes. So he must have been a bit confident or knew something that we didn't. Just briefly, what you're thinking behind that? What do you think of that selection?
I think it's the right decision, and just about what Valtteri doing these little videos and so on. These things do not sort of happen overnight. The contract negotiations take a while, and I think Valtteri also said that he's been approached by them more than a year ago already. So these things do take a while, and they kind of get signed long before it gets announced or it becomes official. So there's plenty of scope for the guys to plant a little story here and start a little rumor there. It's all part of the game. So yes, he played it well. Now I think Cadillac did exactly the right thing. They are more or less a year behind the development cycle of where they should be. because of all the delays in getting approvals from the FIA and then Formula One, first Andretti, and then they had to make all the changes and get Cadillac on board, whatever. So they are probably about a year behind where they should be, and they need all the knowledge and experience that they can get. And the drivers play a very important role in this because they are now obviously, in the final stages of developing next year's car. And both of these drivers, know how a winning team operates, either Red Bull or Mercedes. They know processes that make winning teams. They know procedures. They know, ways of working and that sort of thing. They also know how to develop cars because of their long experience. They also know how to, set up cars on a race weekend itself. More so than a rookie would have been able to do, and I think Cadillac needs all the help that they can get. So from every point of view, it makes sense for the two of them. Both of them are fairly late in their careers, so I think both of them probably want to show something of their careers. They're not champions, but at least maybe over a couple of years. Both of them, I think, are now 30, 35-ish, or in the mid-30s. They've got probably another 3-4 years, to develop the car and the team. And who knows, what kind of success they could reach. GM is not a small company, and you've got the might of probably a lot of American commerce behind them. So if they have the right people, and they have both inside and outside of the cockpit, and those people bond as a unit and work together in the way that winning teams do, there's no reason that they cannot become competitive in the next 2 or 3 years. I think next year is probably too much to ask, but who knows? There can be some surprise. Everybody have started for the last 2 or 3 years already from a clean sheet of paper. So, anything, no, not anything is possible, but it is possible that some teams can bring a surprise. I don't think Cadillac will be one of them, but it's possible that 1 or 2 teams can be more competitive than people expect next year.
Just finally, there were so many rumors about Christian Horner coming back to Formula One, either Cadillac or Alpine, but both those teams going out of their way to say, no truth to that rumors. So is he going to be staying at home? What's the story? I mean, he's no longer director of any of the companies either. Last time we talked about that. Yeah. That's now also gone out the window. He's just basically now, on permanent garden leave? What's happening with him?
Yes, and I think he's probably got a few more millions in his back pocket as well. There must have been some kind of a settlement between him and them. So I don't think he's in need of any money. I think he could probably retire on his own. There's some stories doing the rounds that he's looking at buying some equity from become a part owner of either a current team or even getting involved in a new team. I'm not sure that Red Bull, that Christian Horner and Otmar Zafnauer will sit next to each other, next to the same fire. So unless he buys into a team and then gets complete control, which is what he wants, I don't think. No, I can't speak on his behalf, but everything points to the fact that he wants full control. When he is in that position, what team is going to allow him that kind of full control? Not one of the current teams, I would argue. Anybody new coming into Formula One? There are some stories about a 12th team on the horizon. Not next year, definitely not next year, but maybe in the next 5 years. Who knows? I mean, he's still only in his early 50s, is he? So he's got plenty of time. If you have people like Helmut Marko, who's in his 80s, and Flavio Briatore, who's closing in on 80. How is he?
Yeah, right.
Isn't he 78 or so? Whatever, So there's plenty of time for Horner to get into Formula One if he wants to get back into Formula One. But I think it would probably be on his own terms. And just quickly as an aside, news that broke yesterday, I think it was that McLaren have now been the McLaren racing organization, not just the Formula One team, but the McLaren racing has now been fully taken over by a consortium, not only of Bahrain but also Abu Dhabi. So that and that values the racing operation. And of course, they are both in Formula One and in IndyCar. They're planning a World Endurance Championship entry, I think, in 2027. So they'll be in sports cars from then onwards. This is McLaren Racing. It's as opposed to McLaren Automotive and the other McLaren companies in the group. But it values the McLaren Racing operation at apparently at about $5 billion. You know, the value of the shares that have now been sold to these organizations or these entities in the Middle East, that puts the value of the entire group, not the group, the racing organization, at $5 billion. A lot of people have got a lot of good returns on their investments earlier on.
Last thing about McLaren, now you're talking about, they changed their name from next year onwards. They're now McLaren Mastercard Racing or something.
Yes. Yeah, I try not to because these things tend to change, to give too much attention to, you know, this sort of thing, because Zak Brown is arguably the best in terms of finding sponsorships and partnerships in the paddock. But yeah, it's going to be McLaren Mastercard or McLaren or Mastercard McLaren next year. It's a team sponsorship or a title sponsorship. So yeah. And also, of course, the orange colors fit in nicely.
But that's the thing. It's a title sponsor. Remember, at one stage, Ron Dennis said title sponsors are dead. Remember, and now.
And he also said that no customer team will ever win a constructors championship.
Yeah, that's true. Now, the point I'm trying to make is Williams changed their name to Atlassian Williams, for example, because it must be a major sponsor to incorporate them into your name. And you just mentioned how well McLaren is doing, and how well Zak Brown is running the finance.
Petronas is the title sponsor at Mercedes.
Yes, yeah. So he's putting some big money in there to be able to do that. Yeah. Anyway.
And Stake at Sauber. So, you know, all of these, it is a prestigious thing to be a title sponsor of a Formula One team, and it's all got to do with exposure. And of course, MasterCard would know that, you know, the exposure of Formula One has been growing exponentially the last few years, last 7 or 8 years. And that is a fantastic marketing platform. Doesn't matter what you pay. It really does not matter what you pay for that. You will always get a return on your investment, which is multiples of what you pay.
Yeah, well, just interesting, you know, MasterCard's in there, but, you know, their biggest competition, Visa, is at RB or Racing Bulls. Visa, you know, so that they have to be there, kind of a thing. It makes sense. I like it. Yeah. Anyway, Hendrik, thank you, man. That was lekker. We'll do some review, retrospection, or whatever we call it, next week after the Italian Grand Prix. I'm looking forward to that one. It's so nice to be able to watch some Grand Prix from Formula One on a Sunday for a change, and you know, not just looking at the ceiling or something.
Yeah, let's hope for some surprises on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Good.
The F1 Focus Podcast with MV Welman and Hendrik Verwoerd.